Today on Cryptic Mass Guitar, we do a comparison between the 2018 Gibson Les Paul Classic with P90s and the 2019 Gibson Les Paul Custom 1956 Goldtop VOS. So as I say in all of the comparison videos that I do, YouTube videos are fantastic to build up some excitement over a potential purchase or a prospective purchase. You can hear in someone else's hands, obviously, these two guitars going up against each other, and you can kind of hear the differences perhaps between the two, but it's not in your hands. So the best thing to do before you actually buy a guitar is go in and play the guitars for yourself. Try all of the guitars in the store and see which one just really suits you best, because a goofball like me might prefer something that you don't prefer or like something that you don't like at all, and well, at that point my recommendation to you is meaningless. So always try the guitars before you buy it, and try to buy the one that you can afford, of course, and the one that speaks to you the most. And also to the one guy that's gonna go, hey man, that's 2018 Les Paul Classic, you should be doing a 2019 and above Les Paul Standard 50s with the P90s. I like that. I like your accent first and foremost. But I don't own that guitar, and I really do not foresee me buying that guitar to do a comparison with this one here. So I understand what you're saying, but I only use the guitars that I own in videos. So let's start out with 5 sound sample comparisons, then I'll talk about some of the differences in specs and stuff like that, and then how I think these feel. All right, so there you go. There are all of the 5 different comparisons between both of these guitars. Of course, there are the settings and the amps that I chose to use rather than, what settings you might have used, and these are my hands. And that's like the song, These Are the Daves I Know. They all have their own hands, but they come from different moms. Great song, look it up. Anyway, I do want to talk about the differences here. And it is going to be a little challenging to me because this is a ton. There's just a ton. So starting off, we have a glossed nitrocellulose finish over a slab of mahogany and a maple cap, a carved maple top. Now, this mahogany body here is like 2 or 3 pieces, more than likely 2 pieces glued together. The maple cap is also 2 pieces, more than likely glued together with a center seam. The 1956 VOS has the vintage original sheen glossed nitrocellulose finish. That is over a single piece of mahogany. It's lightweight mahogany and a carved maple top. Now, I can't tell, but historically this should not be center seam. So this is going to be 2 pieces of maple together. Historically, it would be like, the seam would be like up here with the 2 pieces, or down here. I'm not sure though. So right off the bat, you can tell both of these are non-weight relieved. The classic is heavier than the lightweight mahogany that's on the 1956. And the 1956 is 1 piece of mahogany rather than 2 or 3 that's on the classic. Back to the classic, we have a slim taper mahogany neck with a bound rosewood fretboard, and it also has the fret nibs here. On the 1956, we have a chunky C neck profile on a mahogany neck. This chunky C is baseball bat territory. It is thicker than my 57 and my 58. We also have a rosewood fretboard with the bound, and it is bound, sorry, and it has the fret nibs on them. However, the binding is a little thinner, and the fret nibs are a lot smaller than on the classic. Back to the classic here, we have the inlaid Gibson logo. Note the color here. And we also have the Les Paul model logo silk screened on the face of the headstock. We also have the truss rod cover that says classic. Over to the 1956, we have the inlaid Gibson logo here. Note the color, it's a different color. And the Les Paul model is silk screened on the face of the headstock. Note it's in a different location than the other one. And there's nothing on the truss rod cover. Back to the classic, on the back of the headstock is where you will find the Grover Rotomatic tuners. These are modern size, so that means that the holes here for the posts are thicker, and they're actually kind of screwed in on the face of the headstock. So that means if you want to change these tuners to like a modern locking tuner, you can do that without any issues, without reaming out the holes to make them bigger. We also have a Graphtec nut. Over to the 1956, on the back of the headstock is where you will find the Kluson single ring vintage sized tuners. So when I say vintage sized, if you look at the front of the headstock, you'll see that the holes here for the posts are a lot smaller. They're not screwed in, so they're like kind of pressed into the front of the headstock. So if you wanted to change these to a modern size locking tuner, you would have to actually remove these, which is a little bit challenging. You would need a special tool to do so, or a little bit of prayer and luck with a screwdriver. Not recommended. But you would also have to remount the holes if you wanted to install modern size locking tuners, as the holes for the posts are smaller. We also have a nylon nut here. I'm pretty sure the 2018s use Graphtec. I could be wrong. You can correct me in the comments. As far as potentiometers here, we have Gibson branded. These are still audio taper potentiometers. They are Gibson branded, and they have orange drop hand soldered capacitors. So if you were to open up the back, you wouldn't find a PCB or anything like that. These are hand soldered, and they do have the orange drop capacitors. The 2019 and above classics, they do have the PCB because it has all the push pulls and everything. The P90 version here does not have that. So opening this up would look just like a standard 50s or a standard 60s. Over to the 56, we have Gibson branded, they're still Gibson branded, CTS potentiometers. They are audio taper. My good God, they are highly responsive, but a lot of that has to do with the paper and oil capacitors. So when it comes to capacitors, most people don't use them, so it doesn't matter what's in your guitar. But the moment you start taking that tone and dialing it back, that's when the capacitor starts to come in. So one thing that I really highly notice with the custom shops versus the USA models is the moment you start dialing back your tone, or even the volume, it is highly, highly different than on the USA. So that has a lot to do with the capacitors that are in here. So a lot of people call them the Bumblebees or the Black Beauties. They're just the paper and oil caps. Now, as far as pickups go, we have P90s. They're just the soap bar style P90s. They're not dog ear or anything like that, but they're the Gibson P90 pickups. On the 1956 here, we have custom P90 pickups. These sound a whole heck of a lot different and are much louder than the classic here. I did make sure that they are at the same, like the poles are at the same height in relation to the strings and everything. I use this because I'm a nerd, and some people will be like, the only difference, the same accent, only difference there, man, is the way that guy's holding his pick. And, you know, the pole height's different than, you know, the other one. That's why. I love your accent. So these sound a whole heck of a lot different, at least to me, and a lot of other people, to the Gibson USA P90s. It just seems like the USA P90s have a lot more high end to them, whereas the custom ones are a little more well balanced. So you get a little more mid focus rather than focus on the high end. And the neck seems like the low end is just a little bit sweeter than on the Gibson USA. And as far as the bridge, now I replaced this with a Tone Pros locking bridge because I wanted gold. But this would have came with an ABR1. However, if you were to look very closely, and I'm not going to be able to get you in there really closely, you would see that there's a metal doweling system here that connects the stop bar and the tune-o-matic to the body. Over on the 1956, we have an ABR1 bridge. This is drilled directly into the wood on the body. There's no metal doweling system or anything like that. It goes directly into the body. I would assume that that changes some of the acoustic properties and the vibration as it's directly into the wood rather than into a metal doweling system. I'm not totally sold on that, but it's there. And there is a metal doweling system for the stop bar. So spec-wise, that's really the differences here. There's a lot more that I can go into. I'm going to touch on two things really quickly, and then I'll talk about some of the differences here, but one of them does have a direct relation to the differences that I feel. So first and foremost, when it comes to the way that Gibson paints their guitar, I guess you'd say, or finishes their guitars, what you generally see on Gibson USA, so on the neck, on the fretboard, they paint over the binding, or if it's unbound, they just paint over it. And then they use a razor blade and they scrape that off. That's how you're seeing that. That's why on every single Gibson USA, right where the nut is connected, it looks a little, it looks like they've scraped the nut. And it kind of almost looks like there's a finishing defect, but it's not. It's just they use a razor blade and they scrape it right up to the nut. The exact same thing happens with the custom shop stuff. However, you do not see that really weird scrape mark. Like it usually looks like a triangle at the end. You don't really see that on the VOS stuff. Very slightly different. You would never notice that other than, you know, looking at it and going, that looks a little different. The last thing I want to talk about is how this guitar is constructed. And I have to give a little tiny bit of a story here. I'm going to put this down. So I started playing guitar when I was 12 years old. I used to go into, used to be called Music Stop in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and they had a sandwich corner. It's like a little sandwich shop inside the music store, which a lady would serve sandwiches and like coffee and possibly soup. I would always see sandwiches. When I would go into the music store, I would hear older guys, the old fellas and stuff like that, and they'd be talking about, like they'd be in their 60s or 70s. This was 30 years ago. So they'd be talking about how guitars aren't made the same way. So certain, like the amount of wood that's used, the old age wood that's used and stuff like that. But one thing that I heard off and on, and I heard it a little different, was hide glue, hot hide glue, or hot animal glue. I thought for years it was hot Hyatt glue because I was young and only half listening and going, these guys are kooky. But I always heard, oh yeah, they used to use different glue, so they used to use hot, again, I would hear Hyatt glue, and it sounded different. Like the guitars were louder and they rang out. So I kind of grasped onto that knowledge. That's also where I got knowledge on how to properly tune your guitar and how necks should have a little bit of bow in it, and people are absolutely stupid if they think a neck should be perfectly straight. With that being said, the Gibson USA, to attach the top, the carved maple top to the slab of mahogany, they use Titebond glue. To connect the neck to the body, they use Titebond glue. To attach the wings on the headstock here and the fretboard to the neck, they use Titebond glue. To which I never thought anything about it. I know that some companies use like super glue or white glue or yellow glue or something like that, and I never cared at all about glue. I thought it's got to be the quality of the wood, right? Nothing else goes into it. From 2019 and above, Gibson Custom Shop now uses on the VOS and Murphy Lab side, so not on the modern side, so that like cheaper Les Paul Custom that has USA pickups in it. The ABR1 is not, it's not even an ABR1, it's not drilled into the body, it has modern size tuners and stuff like that. That doesn't use this. But these now, the VOS and Murphy Lab, the top is glued onto the body, so the maple is glued onto the mahogany using hot hide glue. The neck is glued into the body using hot hide glue. The fretboard is glued onto the neck using hot hide glue. I'm not sure about the wings. I think it's still hot hide glue. I'm not quite sure, but I'm gonna go with yes, it sounds like hot hide glue rather than, I think they used white glue before. So it's glue. Why does that matter? It matters because up until I tried out a VOS guitar, which I always stop myself from doing because, well, one of the ones that I wanted was $9,000. The one that I wanted even more was $7,150. And the one that I want the most is $9,300. The other ones are $6,700, and like they're not. It's something that I didn't want to get myself into because I knew I would want to buy them immediately, and would feel sad if they were what you would think they are. So up until I tried one of those VOS guitars, which was my 58, I would have thought nothing about glue. The hot Hyatt glue that I thought it was, I thought was just an old wives' tale. And the moment I played a single note on the 58 that I ended up buying, I was 100% convinced of hot hide glue. Basically, what hot hide glue does is it crystallizes. And it fuses the wood together tighter than most other glues, and it doesn't really leave like that film that some other glues use. Now, I'm not a glue expert, I'm just someone that heard stuff when I was younger and continued to hear things about hot hide glue And then I tried a guitar that is all hot hide glue, and now those are the only guitars that I want to play now, because it's witchcraft. So what does that mean for the tight bond connected glued bodies? It means that now I feel that they're a little duller. They don't ring out as much. They're not as loud acoustically as the VOS, but it doesn't make them bad. This is probably the best P90 guitar that I have ever played in my life, next to now my 1956 VOS, because that blows this out of the water. My biggest complaint about this guitar from when I bought it years ago was that it had a slim taper neck over the 50s baseball bat style neck. I thought if I got that, I would never, ever stop playing this guitar because it would be absolutely perfect. You need a noise suppressor or some sort of like noise gate for it if you're going to be playing high gain, but man, this thing can do high gain. So this has a lot of mojo, but this thing is friggin' witchcraft. Acoustically, it's louder. This whole thing rings like one piece of wood. Again, one solid piece of lightweight mahogany, so there's no seam here whatsoever. It's just one piece. 2 pieces of maple on the top, mahogany neck, rosewood fretboard. We have 3 species of wood going on here, and it feels like one giant piece. This thing just absolutely rings, and the vibration that I feel when I'm playing is unlike anything else other than my other VOS guitars. So enough about the glue, because really, to me, it could be something different, but that's what I've always heard when I was younger. What you hear about a little bit from some people, like why they use hot hide glue and stuff like that. I'm feeling and hearing what these people were talking about. So that's enough about the glue. And I did touch on things with the pickups earlier, whereas the Gibson USA, they're not dog ears, they are the soap bar style P90s. There's a little more high-end focus, so there's a lot more top end than the custom P90s. That's not a bad thing. It's really all down to preferences. You can change things on your amp to get things a little more to your liking. But I do find that sometimes the high-end or top-end focus on these P90s really do benefit things. So you can kind of get a little more slap and spank at times. If that is what you're looking for, then you can immediately on the custom P90s. There's no loss of the spank and sparkle and shimmer on the custom P90s. They're just a lot more full sounding, I think. There's definitely a volume boost in comparison to the USA. But they sound like they're fuller and they cover more of the sound spectrum. Now, as far as tuning stability, there's no issues. Everyone talks about a G-string on the Les Paul. They're crazy. Basically, and I've said this to no end, and this is what I learned when I was young, and I went to the music store that had the sandwich shop. So when you tune up to pitch, never down to pitch. Because if you tune down to pitch, the moment that you start doing bends on your strings, there's slack around the post because you've now tuned down to pitch. It's just how it works. So there's slack on the post and slack in the nut. So that means the moment that you start bending, that string is going to start going flat. That happens more often because of the break angle on the G string. So to tune properly, you tune up to pitch at all times. And then you stretch your strings, all 6 of those strings. That should make them flat. It should start pulling it a little bit flat. Tune it again. Tug on them again. And then, after the 3rd time, it should stay in tune. At that point, it should stay in tune for probably about an hour of two of solid playing. Might slip out a little bit, but I've owned Paul Reed Smiths, Fenders, Gretches, Ibanez, Jackson, all of those, and they all do the exact same thing. Just tune up to pitch. Same goes for the 56. However, I'm not sure what is going on with these VOS guitars, but it just seems that when you're tuning up to pitch, it's easier to get it up to pitch. That's not to say that like there's a bad tuning ratio on here where you can't do finite tuning. They're just, I don't know what's going on, but all 4 of my VOS guitars do the exact same thing. If I need to tune, I turn it up and it tunes up, and it's just a lot easier. I don't know what's going on. I still think it's witchcraft. Now, I did touch on this earlier. This is a whole heck of a lot heavier than this because they use lightweight mahogany on the VOS stuff. This is a, holy goodness, heavy Les Paul. So if you like the non-weight relieved Les Pauls, this is the one for you because this is heavy as absolutely all hell. And playing wise, that's really up to your preference. Again, you're going to feel a little more vibration with a thicker neck here and the fact that this rings out as a single piece. But this doesn't slack in that department either. It's just really comfortable to play both of these. Whether you're playing rhythms or whether you're playing leads. This might hurt your back a little more because it's heavier, but this will hurt your wallet a lot more. So, you know, take your pick. Anyway, that is all I have to say here. Hopefully it was a little bit helpful. I know that I've upset a few people because it's not these standard 50s that they currently offer. That would be a little better because that one would be gold as well. And it would have the thicker neck and wouldn't have the Grovers. It would have the Gibson Vintage Deluxe, which is a take off of the Kluson Vintage Deluxe style tuners. So I guess I'm sorry, but both of these guitars are fantastic, so I really don't care. Thanks for watching.